Fun. And salutations, y'all, and welcome to season 1, episode 1 of Design Therapy.
Or episode 7.
Oh, episode 7, excuse me. Yes, season 1, episode 7, which is crazy.
It's always the first episode. It's always the beginning.
It's always the beginning, yeah. So, I really wanted to be clear about what Design Therapy is for those of you that are attending and sort of what our goals are behind this broadcast that we have every Friday. And Design Therapy is about leadership through design to empower the next generation of creative thinkers and builders to redesign the world. It's really about you being able to develop the confidence in yourself, to align your skills and your value, and to really find the best way that you can be the most powerful creative that you can be, and how to learn your values so that you can align and collaborate with the right kind of creatives, so you can really identify the best kinds of clients to work with, and ultimately have confidence and develop your expertise and develop your own voice. So as always, we want to welcome you in the many different places in the world where you're coming from, whether you're in Brazil, whether you're in Portugal, Spain, Colombia, Panama, or in
Atlanta, North Carolina.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you from wherever in the world that you're checking into the broadcast. So, as always, I am your facilitator, Keone Chong, and I've got my co-creators here, Mary Gribbin and Jose Caballer. We also have a special guest, Joe Perez, who has this incredible background in leadership training and personal development, and he's been a essential partner in really validating a lot of these ideas and theories based on his expertise. So Joe, if you want to say hey real quick.
Hey everyone, nice to be here.
Yeah, really blessed to have him as part of the audience. And
where are you located, Joe?
ATL, Atlanta, Georgia.
Show them what you want.
Yeah.
So, as always, this is brought to you by, this is the agenda, but it's brought to you by Core, Brand Strategy Foundations. And as always, this is the first time checking it out. We ask for you to like and subscribe. If you've been lurking and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. This is how we can ensure that we can continually bring you really high value content. So let's talk a little bit about today's agenda. So what we'll have is we'll have the drop in. This is really how we connect with you and our audience. We have, a question on discovery today, and we'll do that for about 15 minutes. Then we'll dive into the download. So the download is a quote that we usually like to bring to the stage to kind of help set the right mindset for you as you enter into today's conversation. Then we'll have, let me just change this a little bit. I want to keep the music funky for y'all. We'll talk about the theme for today and this week, and we'll talk about the main topics and ideas and principles that we want for you to take away. Then we've got an exercise today, and that's sharing our story. It's a continuation of the work that we've been doing over the last few weeks, and that's about our origin stories and really helping being able to craft our own origin stories and using that origin story as a way to identify your purpose through your superpower and the impact that you want to leave on the world. We've got Joe and Cassie who are going to model that experience for us today. And then we're going to dive into that exercise.
One quick note, Keone, that I wanted to interject. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We are broadcasting live to Facebook, who are only inside our group, and we're also recording. And one of the things that we have been sensitive about is that we're sharing here your stories. So, if you don't want to share, please let us know. Say yes if you're okay with sharing the story. Like, we want to have consent, and like if you don't have to have your camera on, but we like it when people do, and they're sharing themselves to the world. It's a way of building confidence. And many of us are broadcasting already. Like, Roxana's doing a podcast, or some of you want to. but are a little bit shy, so this is just an opportunity for that. But I wanted to make that present, that we're going to start doing that a little bit more officially as we get bigger.
Yeah.
Thank you. Back to you in the studio, Keone.
Yeah.
And back to you in your home.
And then after we pop out of our exercise, we'll end it with the upload. And then as always, we have our post-broadcast hangout sesh, music and no cookies. So let's just dive right into the drop-in. So today's drop-in is going to be...
Arlen, you'll be able to do that in the private room. Sorry, I'll be talking in the chat. I'll shut up.
No worries, man. So today's drop-in is going to be about name, location, and then what does discovery mean to you? It's been the theme of the week. We talked about it within projects and utilizing core, and how discovery is a huge principle in core and the execution of brand strategy. But what I'd really like to do is just open up the conversation a little bit wider and outside of the context of the work. What does discovery mean to you? So I'll model that. I'd love if Mary can model that, and maybe Joe, and then let's open that up to a few folks from the stage. So my name is Keone Chong, and I'm located in Los Angeles. What does discovery mean to me? Discovery to me really is about curiosity. And I feel like I have an insatiable curiosity. I always want to learn about the things, and I'm driven to understand things at a deeper level. So for me, discovery is this, the way that I see the world. It's the way that I understand the world. And I've always felt in that understanding the world in a deeper level that I can understand myself. But that's what discovery means to me. Jose, or Mary, would you like to come up and share?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay.
You can.
I don't have my mic on. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, oh gosh, I think it's like a perpetual journey of self-discovery for sure. So it means to me on that level of self-discovery, just really embracing a growth and an agile mindset, being like, curiosity for sure, is, an element to consider, and for me to like embrace when I think about how to approach, the discovery of what I want, who I am, how I fit in, where I'm going, and also, it's just being like a cycle where some frameworks that I've learned can help me ground myself, and not try to be, super attached to outcomes, I guess. Yeah, so discovery to me means being open and having a really, strong boundary around like growth mindset, which sounds strange, like, because it's like, why would you need a boundary around that? But I feel like I need to practice using the frameworks that that we use with our clients, like, and that we use when we're working in my own personal life, so that I can continue to discover who I am and be true to myself. Yeah. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Mary.
Yeah.
Joe, would you like to come to the stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I love both of those. I think their discovery has obviously many different approaches, but and for me the crux of it, whether it's personal, right, whether it's for myself, whether it's for a brand, a business, in any context, is really listening at a deep level. And I will use my curiosity to listen and dig, and like Mary said, the frameworks to give more efficient use of the space and the time. But ultimately for me, I would say that it's about listening deeply. that's yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to read some of the folks from the audience. We've got Arsenije, who's in Belgrade, Serbia. And for him, discovery means learning and connecting on a deeper level. Powerful man. Jose, he says that discovery to him has really been about self-discovery. And it's been a journey that he's really been going on most of his life, starting at the age 39 and doing it professionally. Because what he came to understand was success in design was really empty. Money was great and he loved it, but it didn't feed his soul. And through discovery, he found himself in community and doing YouTube and exploring, Burning Man and yoga retreats, going through all the things, all the self-discovery tools. We've got Patricia in the Philippines, and discovery for her means getting to know the people around her and learning together. I love that. We've got Adriana Gonzalez, who's in Mexico. And discovery is to experiment with the force and confidence of your true self, to be able to share with others without judgments. Ooh, powerful. We've got Mauricio in Colombia. And he's like, he's not really sure what to say. He feels like it's a broad topic and it can be experienced in many ways and come from many directions. Sometimes we have the opportunities to see things, yet we decide not to. So your own willingness to do so is a big part of it. And I totally agree with that. It's definitely a journey of choice. You have to be intentional with discovery. We've got Tino. Why do I always say Tino? Tino, who's in LA. And discovery to him is an evergreen art that helps him improve personally, professionally, and spiritually. Awesome, man. I love that. And so we'll do two more. We'll do Emily Spivak from Austin, Texas. It's a way to connect with others and to deepen relationships. And also a learning junkie. She's also a learning junkie. So she's like, it's also about learning. And then lastly, we've got Ginder, who's in London. And discovery is about finding out what you want out of life. When the daily drudge takes over, it's so easy to lose focus. Finding my community and creating a better world for people and for the love of this beautiful earth. And it's also the journey inside to align to your purpose, to your horizon. That was beautiful, Ginder. And thank you for sharing. So let's dive in a little bit to today's topic. And today's topic is, it's all about the art of listening. And so, this is really this fundamental skill that really opens the world to you. There's an African proverb, there's a Jamaican proverb, I should say this, where, growing up, it always went like this. If you don't hear, you feel. And it was super simple. And my mother would say that every single time. Every time I did something that cost me some sort of pain, she was like, you don't hear, you feel. So let's dive into this, all right? Listening is the most difficult skill to learn and the most important to have. And so I want to really dive into this skill of listening. Joe's going to dive in and he's going to talk a little bit about it and like the levels of listening. And overall, it's one of the most important skills that you need to have for leadership. And it's really about giving insight to yourself and to the world. So today's goals that we want to try to achieve is 3 things. We really want to understand listening skills as a leadership skill. And that means, understanding what active listening is, the mindset that you need to have when you're active listening. And we want to be able to use those listening skills to be able to identify themes. In our exercise today, we're going to share our story. So in a continuation of what we were doing last week. And I know some of you guys are further ahead than others, and that's completely fine. We have the worksheets and the documents. And Patricia, if you could post those in the chat, that would be awesome. So if you're new to the exercise, just sort of learning how to tell your story using Joseph Campbell's hero story format. If you've already developed this story, that's incredible. Then what I'd like for you guys to do is to experience sharing that story with each other using active listening and then identifying themes. And then ultimately, what we're going to do and we're going to discuss at the end is how themes really allow for you to understand what your superpower is and what your impact to the world is. And that determines your purpose. We're going to touch on that a little bit this week, but that's really going to be the focus and the topic for next week. So let's talk a little bit about active listening and why it's important as a facilitation skill. As creatives, we always struggle with building authenticity and confidence. We struggle with, confidence in our expertise and the impact that we can deliver. And that ultimately means that we need to have confidence in the value that we bring and our ability to price at a rate that is sustainable for us, that allows for us to grow, but also values our creative contribution. And then ultimately, we need to be able to develop confidence within our clients and our relationships. And this is an exercise, or this is, excuse me, not an exercise, but this is a skill that's going to allow for you to achieve all of these things. To be able to build authenticity and confidence comes from you being able to share your story and really own your voice. Confidence in expertise and impact. This is your ability to facilitate design conversations and really be able to synthesize the input from multiple stakeholders and really be able to come up with a solution that is co-created, that's driven by impact. Confidence in your value and pricing, again, right? That comes from your ability to be able to articulate your value and to be able to own that value. This step right here, I feel like, is really about owning your voice and being able to use your voice. And then confidence in clients and relationships. And that comes from the ability to have a deep empathy and understanding for your clients and where they are and what they need, and be able to do that continuously, not just in one session or just in one deliverable, but to be able to do so throughout the lifetime of the work that you can potentially provide for your client. So Jose, I'd love for you to dive in, because what I'd like to do right now is talk a little bit about the mindset. And this carries over from the conversation that we were having on Wednesday, which was really about the ability to use discovery in your creative projects. In core, we talked about these 5 important elements. Jose, I'd like for you to dive in and kind of recap them for our audience.
Yeah, for sure. I just reposting one of Patricia's Facundo. Remember, it's bring your pet today, and squirrels outside your window don't count, Bjorn. So for me, this is really important because when you go into the arena of facilitation, whether it's virtual or whether it's in the room, whether you go into a company, one of the biggest challenges that we've realized that as a designer, we didn't necessarily have a lot of experience in it. It was about understanding these 5 kind of principles that create the container, meaning a circle or meaning a space. The mindset is really what I mean when I say container. And I'll just do the 3 really fast. Cultural context, understanding the culture of the company, like where have they been, who are they now, like what's their culture like, and what are the cultural attributes that define it. Really, their values is what does that. Are they yogis? Are they hippies? Are they I'm talking about EO products? Are they about plants? Are they what are those things that make them? And is that context match you? Because a lot of times when we go work for clients, it's not even about understanding their cultural context. It's also about the ability to resonate enough with them to have it be a fun project. Like who likes to work with people that you just you cringe every time you go to the project? That's not great. And we do that early on in our careers because we got to make money, we got to make a living. But if you start defining who you are early and broadcasting your values, eventually will start only attracting people. By defining yourself just like a brand and putting it out there just like a brand, you then begin creating your own reality. So cultural context is super important in many ways. So situational understanding is what the hell is going on with the company? Are they losing revenue? Are they gaining revenue? What do they really want? What do they desire? Are they trying to grow revenue? And that's really at the situational level. It hasn't even come to the why, because that's something that we're adding now. Like it's that entrepreneur I used to ask all the time, why are you doing this? Like, what is it that's really motivating and driving you? And anytime I heard like, oh, they're doing it because it's an opportunity in the marketplace and they wanted to make a buck from it, there's nothing wrong with that. But that red light that went on when I said that is, they won't be able to sustain the messiness that it is to build an online business or to build something like meaningful, because they're going to give up and that's going to fail. And in startup world, I learned that from investors, kind of listening to them. And I read a really great book on startup investing. And it was basically, we don't invest in ideas, we invest in people, because all these ideas come up at the same time in the zeitgeist, and you're going to get a bunch of people pitching you the same idea. And you're like, no. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, something that Hania has pointed out many times in Latin America, people are in survival mode and they're like, oh, vamos a hacer esto porque queremos hacer dinero. Nothing wrong with that. I used to peddle stuff on the streets in the Dominican Republic, and I used to be a shoe shine boy, and I made some money. But it was really about the conversation. And they're like, oh, you're Doña Fira and the grandson. Look at you working for a white boy from the United States, shining my shoes, So it really became an understanding of the people. And it was my connection to people and my love of people that I was really selling. Not that I was shining shoes for freaking 10 cents back then. It was like I could, with 2 shoe shines, I could go buy like some sweet stuff at the store. Social awareness is like being understanding of the politics, the body politic. Our friend Barrett calls this Machiavellianism, which we really don't like. Keone and I are like, no, please don't call it that. Do you know who the players are? Do you know what's happening? Do you know how the management feels about Bjorn? Do you know what he needs to continue, his journey? Do you know how people are interacting? Do you know, what the motivations are? And now for me, I've developed this sense, more keenly now in empathy and in love and in connection and in, making sure people are getting people first, because organization is really at the end. In management theory for the 20th century, you just get rid of, whatever you don't need. And you don't really pay attention to the people and their needs. But social awareness is really about being aware of the politics. Who's in the room? What's the attitudes people have about the CEO you're working with? If it's a solopreneur, who are the most important people around them? Because that person's husband or wife is going to see the colors and say they don't like them, and they come back and you're going to be like, ah! That's the classic. Oh, my wife didn't like it. In a post-patriarchal world, it's like my husband really didn't, or my wife didn't like it either. And it's, ungendered and in general. Personal taste is, what is your taste? Like we used to talk about Mauro, who's here. And I know his personal taste, right? So how do you align, I know my personal taste, and you're seeing a lot of it in the system, right? I like making things messy and collagey, and that was my style in school. And I was like a pirate. I don't have any style. I don't stick to it. I just do things. So my style became the remix. Like I always had, and people love my work because it was so visceral and so powerful, because it was just expressive, which is totally my personality. I'm a loud, obnoxious Puerto Rican guy. So my personal taste is that. Point of view is super important. What is your point of view on the issue that you're designing for? If you don't care about what you're designing, you should not be designing it, and you should say it. If you're trapped in dissatisfaction and not having meaning in your work, is because you're not broadcasting your values. You're not being authentic to what you like and you don't like. I used to tell clients, this is great, but I didn't tell them the fact that you're just doing it for the money, not cool. Or the fact that this idea is stupid, not cool. I didn't say any of those things because that's subjective. That was my opinion. I said, thank you very much. Here's what I think might be beneficial for you. And let me introduce you maybe potentially to some resources. But at some point I stopped doing that, because then I don't want to introduce stuff that I don't like to my people, because my people are me. So I just didn't, I said, what? No, thank you very much. So no is important, but you bring in yourself. Like I said this to Roxana, I said, I want to see you in the design of what we're doing, and whatever that might be, because the style of what we're doing is inclusive, right? The fonts that we selected, that specific fonts you're looking at right now, Keone, the space metaphor, we were playing Cyberpunk 2077, and the stencil on the side. Oh, and we love watching The Expanse. So we're going to space, believe it or not, whether you we're going to go to space as humans eventually. So that's what we're going to paint the side of the spaceships with that font that is a stencil. Shh. And then the cultural context, situational awareness font, that's Mauro. We knew Mauro was coming on board to help us. So that's the style of font he likes. So I'm like, hey, let's give him what he wants already so that he's happy expressing himself in it. So it's inclusion, it's being inclusive of all the points of view, because design is not objective, it's always subjective. And the missing thing in facilitation when people say, is this the right solution, is this container of, core only gives you handles. You still have to set a course. You still have to be a captain of your own destiny. You got that? You see where all the metaphors are coming in the design of the system? We're training captains, leaders, not followers. I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Jose. And Joe, in our conversations yesterday, as we were kind of reviewing for today's sermon, we talked about the 3 levels of listening, and the difference between hearing and listening. And I'd love for you to come up and talk a little bit about that with our audience.
There you go. Yeah, cool. So there are 3 levels of listening that and most of us are very aware of just intuitively, but it's very powerful. Even as having that mindset, like Jose is pointing to, this is like, I would say, the underlying skill to that permeates the entire container, if you will, whether that's even with ourselves, even personally, like, listening to ourselves, but when we're in relationship with other, whether in this case, today's practice, we're doing it with an individual, or whether it's a brand, these 3 levels are still very they're still going to be they're still going to be existing no matter the context. So the first level of listening is when we're basically listening to our own thoughts. It's very subjective in nature. It is at a restaurant, I'm thinking about, oh, what am I gonna get? I wonder if I'm gonna like this dish or that dish. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm just listening to my own thoughts. So in a communication with our peers or someone in front of me, a brand or a person, in this case, our peers, it is, what am I thinking? What is really what they're saying? The tips or the way to know if you're in level 1 is usually, do I want more information? I'm trying to figure something out. I'm trying to make sense of what I'm listening. So it's all the thoughts in my own head. So that's the first level of listening. The second level of listening, which is a lot of times referred to as active listening, is when we're 100% focused on what's in front of us. And this is just completely leaning fully into the person or subject matter in the brand or individual right in front of us. We are just noticing the pitch of their voice, the tone, to seeing their body language. There's something changed, what's shifted, and it's completely focused on what's in front of us. Not like we're not even aware of our own thoughts. At this stage, at this level of listening, we become a lot more intuitive. We start just kind of looking at what's in front of us, looking at the cues, and and noticing what's really moving and happening within this person in front of us. And then level 3, it's now when you are stepping outside of your own self and the individual, and imagine now to being in the holistic, being the container, and you're observing fully the person in front of you, and also yourself and all the senses that are coming within you, but softly, like at a soft, blurry, from not fully being aware of it, but just present to it. For example, so you notice, you notice a shift in their voice, and you notice something that the person is saying, and you are aware of the emotion that causes in you, and you take that emotion as information. So it's not just you're fully leaning into the person, you're not really aware of your thoughts, you're just observing what's happening in front of you, and you're just completely leaning into the space, and something shows up in you you listen to it as information. So now your intuition becomes another source of input for information. So you go with that, and you're like, I'm sensing. I get the sense that there's a sadness in what you're sharing. What's that about? You know, and let them now. You reflected that on them. The person's gonna share, and whether that landed or doesn't land, it doesn't matter. You're using that input as part of the information that is being shared, and you're listening to that as well. So it's the ability to listen to both fully to what's in front of you, the person in front of you, and also listening to the cues that are showing up in response to what you're fully listening to, but not really focused on your thoughts and what you're trying to. And one key thing here is just you're not thinking about the next question. You're not thinking about what am I going to ask? What's my next brilliant question? You're just focused on what's there a second ago, and you're just there listening and just diving and weaving through what's present in the moment. So
I love that, Joe. And so I didn't actually, now looking at the deck, I didn't mean to drop these in 3 numbers. I meant to be just plot points, but I wanted to, kind of talk about the way that I had understood that, and hopefully a way that you guys can start to understand like the different levels of listening. When Joe explained this to me yesterday and I heard about the first level and your thoughts in your head, to me, that came across as you taking things almost as a literal sense, because that's the way that our brain responds. We hear a word and automatically respond with a definition. And that's completely fine, but that is a very superficial understanding, right? When somebody says this sky is blue, are they talking about the emotion, right? Are they just talking about the color, right? Or are they referencing to this world perspective that they have? Like there can be so many different levels of interpretation based on how you perceive the information and how you choose to engage with the circumstance and the meaning. So the first level, I understood that as just like almost literal understanding, because the thoughts in your head are responsive. They see something in the thought in your head, you're automatically going to come in. And that's really a reflection of your biases and your enculturation, the way that you were raised, your experiences that you have, which can be completely different than the individual that's really trying to communicate with you and share something with you. Then I understood the second level as really circumstantial understanding. It's moving beyond just the like this thing happened and really starting to understand the circumstances surrounding it, the meaning behind it. What was the intent? What was the things that were happening that was really driving that, right? And then the third level, which is really like the deep emotional, empathetic understanding, is where like you're really feeling the perspective and you're going through and you're placing yourself in the situation of that individual that you're trying to understand, of that person that you're really trying to get to know at a deeper level. And in that space, you are being able to identify things that maybe they couldn't even identify, right? We, in so many ways, tend to block out a lot of our emotional responses to situations, or we are sometimes have difficulty tapping into the emotional responses that we have in a lot of the conversations and experiences and things that happen in our life. It's why we have therapists, it's why we have leaders, it's why we have individuals like Joe that can really help us understand ourselves at a deeper level. And to me, that's what like really feeling or that third level, that empathetic understanding was about. How does that sound, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you pointed something really interesting there at the end, which is very, something that, and this is a skill. I mean, this is something we practice and we lean into and we do it over and over. But like you mentioned, like we need to trust also our own responses, and like leaning into that, it's a little scary, at the beginning to say, especially to a client, like, oh, I'm sensing this and this or that. Because you don't want to offend them, you don't want to say the wrong thing, but ultimately is truly trusting your own. If you are fully leaning into, and I love how you put that. It makes it more tangible and I think a little more pragmatic. Like circumstantial here, looking at what's in front of me, and if you're fully leaning into that completely, you know, and your ego aside, I mean, it's about this person, it's about this brand, it's about this business. You then just got to trust yourself that your intuition, it's giving you something, and it might not be the right thing. It doesn't matter, but there's something, you're picking up something, and it's leaning into that and trusting. And that takes a little, and as you do it, you'll see that, hey, I something happened and my senses, you know, picked it up. And every time I say it, the more and more you get that feedback that something was there, you'll start trusting it, you know, a little bit more and more. So I think trust in what shows up for us in regards to what we're looking at, it's the key to that third level, is just trusting that, trusting ourselves, really.
So I want to talk about trust, and I want to talk about fear, and I want to highlight Shaquille, his "Hello, I'm multitasking" in my song "Hello, it's me, I'm multitasking" from the other side. One of the things that I love doing is it's training for pirate kitchens. Keone and I have been talking about this. Like, can we actually be in the kitchen, have a meaningful conversation, remember it, and facilitate each other, and have emotions connected to it while we're cooking and while we're doing all these other things? You're gonna have to facilitate. You're gonna have to be on the whiteboard. You're gonna have to be on the keyboard, and you're gonna have to be able to stay connected. That's very difficult for men to do, and it's much more easier for women to do. That's why women are able to be better mothers and better multitaskers, because they can do a million things. I always ask Mary, like, I don't know how you do your life, because you have 3 kids, you have work, you have life, you have, you know, relationships and friendships, and, you know, it's all in this beautiful flow. So the power of the mother is super important. And it's also Pachamama, and I'm not going to go there, but fear. So when we're designers, we're at a job or we are on a project, we're afraid we're going to get fired. Therefore, we don't want to connect. We just want to do what's right. And in that like tension of doing what's right, we kind of lose our shit and like we kind of almost faint and pass out. That's a problem. So you have to breathe. But more importantly, if you don't know what you need to be doing, or if you don't know why the client is not happy or why it's not satisfied, put your mouse down, go talk to them. Just sit there and listen and sketch it. Why do they, you know, let them talk it through, sketching out on a piece of paper, you know, like, well, it's not a piece of paper, but it's a heart. And then kind of come back and say, oh, okay, here's what the client wants. Your client is your co-designer, right? And there are clients that are much more creative than others. But the issue of like you feeling like you need to be right in front of your client and that you need to go away and come back with the right solution, it's really creates a lot of anxiety. It also creates rework, because then the client's like, oh, that's not what I was talking about. So one of the things that I do, and you know, Bjorn can back me up on this, is like, oh, that's what they're asking for, but let's go talk. I go to the conference room, have the conversation with the client, and like just really sketch it out, then go take it back to the designer. But better yet, let's go to you know, a store and look at what that looks like in the real world, and like write down the attributes of it and like what the client is saying, and then let's come back and design it. And then when we present to the client, they're like, yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about. So that process is about designing together, not about being right. And that's the same in facilitation. It's not about me being right. And what the strategy is that I listen, and was I able to say, oh, the CEO, everybody feels really excited about this. One trick I use is I learned from a healer. It's have people say their name and see how they feel about their last name. That's how they feel about their father. Like if it's like, I'm Jose Caballer, I'm like, oh, what's going on there? But then when you have them say the attributes during the brand attributes exercise, and people are like, oh, innovative, like, yeah, you're kind of not believing that. Like, and they say like, you know, connected, and they're kind of, their voice goes up a little bit. And Joe does this really well. He when he's my coach, when he's in the middle of the session, he goes, wait a minute, your energy just shifted. You got really excited about that. Tell me more about that. And then he goes deep, and then he makes me cry, which is great. But if you can make someone cry in a core session, bonus points, man, because I've done it and it's amazing.
It was awesome. Tons of insight in that little tidbit right there. Thank you, Jose. So as we shift to kind of prepare ourselves for our exercise, what I'd like for us to do is to kind of look at how to active listen, and just some 5 guidelines while we do this. And while I'm talking about this, just to give you guys a heads up on how the agenda is going to play out. We're going to go through this, and then we're going to shift into exercise mode. Joe is going to come up with Cassie, and they're going to mirror what the exercise should look like for today. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually retell our story, and then we're going to mine for themes. And so Joe is going to give an example of that. And then we're going to dive into our breakout rooms. It's going to be 10 minutes each. And in the breakout room, what we're going to do is we're going to tell each other's story. one person's going to active listen, and their job is to really use these skills that we're going to really talk about right now, and then really try to pull the themes out for that. The goal is for today, you guys to get comfortable going through the process of identifying themes and being able to pull them down. I suggest you use a pen and paper. In the past, we used the Google Doc, and it was really difficult. There's a lot of multitasking going on. So in these next few minutes, if you could just grab a pen and paper and kind of prepare for that, and then we'll dive into the one-on-ones. We'll end the one-on-ones with a way to really track your themes, and then we'll dive into the upload, and we'll reference some of the books. A lot of you guys have been asking, like, where is this information coming from? What are you reading? All this stuff. So I'll reference the books, and then we'll have the dropout. So,
and one thing to note, in the portal jump, you're going to be matched by the algorithm. So you have to start wherever you were, and you have to take over for the store. Like, basically, you're not going to be matched with the same person.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about how to active listen. So 5 steps, really simple. First thing is paying attention. Like, if your attention was something of currency, like, you're paying it forward, and it's really motivated by your curiosity. So, like, really get yourself into the mindset of being curious about what it is that you're trying to understand and all of the different ways that this thing can come together. The next thing is to listen with your body. And so listening isn't just this thing that's happening in your brain. It also happens in the way that your body is. And you can tell, right? Like, when somebody sits back and they fold their arms and they kind of do this thing, like, are they really listening? Or what are they trying to say with their body? But if someone's like leaning in, Chris Do talks about the lean in as one of the really first big epiphanies when he understood core. And you can understand when you're really facilitating core well, and you're really facilitating deep conversations. What happens? They lean in. They're like, hey, right? And it's your body. It's this full body experience. The next thing is really clarify your understanding. So this is about asking open-ended questions. So how did you feel when that happened? What does that mean for you? Where were you when this was happening? What were the things that were going on, right? Open-ended questions are very different than close-ended questions, which are typically yes or no questions, or questions that have really defined finite answers. What color did you wear? Were you happy or not? Right? Like, these are single-ended questions, really short answers, and they tend to close conversations as opposed to opening that portal a little bit deeper and being able to dive in and really get that value.
Can I add, Keone, can I add a little something that I think is really valuable to what you're saying? As far as the open-ended question, also try avoiding why questions. And the reason is because there is usually, it elicits a justification versus what or how. You're just what's there. I mean, there's no judgment behind it. What's there? How is that there? So just a little pointer there.
That's a really great point. In Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, or How to Start With Why, I believe is the name of the book. He doesn't like why questions either. And for him, he says he believes that why questions confuse our neocortex and our limbic system, meaning we're trying to rationalize an emotional response. And so he says, if you feel like you need to ask a why question, use a what question, right? So if you wanted to know why did you do that, instead ask, what about what happened made you feel like you needed to act this way, right?
Exactly.
So if you feel like you need to ask a why, shift it to a what. That allows for a limbic brain to really process that question at a deeper level, and you can get a more authentic answer. And then the other element of this is about paraphrasing. Jose does this well. I like to do this particularly when facilitating core constantly. I say, okay, so this is what I'm hearing. You're saying this. Does this sound right? Yeah? Okay. This is what I heard. This is what I saw. Right? So you're recounting the story and you're always building this emphasis. And really what it allows for you to do is like anchor into that understanding and then go deeper. And it allows for the person to know that, wow, okay, you're with me on this journey of communication. You're with me in this understanding. Jose, I think you wanted to say something.
No. Continue, please.
Okay, awesome. The fourth thing that I want to that we should be paying attention to in active listening is addressing our biases. We're all biased. It's just because of the way that we raise. It's a part of the enculturation. This is a fact. We all have biases. There's nothing that we can do about it. I am a man, so you know what that means? I know that I'm always going to be biased towards men. It's just a fact. Now, me understanding that allows for me to compensate. Me understanding that allows for me to understand, okay, my experience is going to be super biased. So whatever this person is communicating to me, I need to emphasize their perspective and their point of view, because my point of view is going to skew that understanding, right? If I was a white person and I was talking to another black person, it would be the same perspective. I cannot tell this person how they should act, look, or feel based on my experience, because there's no way that I could understand things from their experience. That is a bias that I have, and biases are active. So we have to actively combat against them in order to have open, fair, equitable communication and understanding. And then lastly is to respond, right? We all have the friends that'll sit there and they'll just look at you and they'll be like, okay. Very little response. Did this person actually hear me or not? Jose's got a homie, Tony Wong, and he's like, this was my first time hanging with him, and his emotional response is never like too high or never too low. So we say something interesting, and he'd be like, yeah, okay. And you're like, wait, so did you like that? You didn't like that? Like, what's going on? He's like, yeah, okay. Mary's laughing.
He does that. I mean, even my kid noticed it the other day because I'm working really closely with him right now, and he's like, he's so good at his job, Mom. You sometimes sound like really bitchy. Sometimes you sound really mad. Sometimes you sound really excited. My oldest son was.
It's always tell the truth.
It made him sound like my voice, my tone of voice with the clients and stuff. I was like, now I'm like super aware. I'm like this whole new level of awareness. Like, yeah.
And Tony Wong is a master at that, and that allows scale in organizations. He's a Navy captain, so I don't, like a Navy admiral. I don't judge myself for not being like Tony, and I don't try to become more like Tony. I actually work with Tony, and I hire him to help us with our projects. So just because we're crazy pirates and we're emotional, yes, we can improve our emotional state. Yes, we can be less bitchy, but I get bitchy with my clients, and I'm like, girlfriend, like, no, you're not doing that. I'm not feeling good because of this situation. So just being real is actually pretty good. Anyway, I'm just saying we don't have to all become Tony Wong because we're all him anyway.
No, but there's a mastery to like the intentional dialogue, right? And there's a certain level. For me, I'm curious. Like, I like being inspired by people and seeing what I can emulate.
I get that. Put a bunch of Brazilians in the room, and that theory goes out the window. No offense to the Brazilians.
Or Jamaicans.
It's not. I'm not countering your theory, Mary. I'm not invalidating it. It's true. I learned a lot from Tony. All I'm saying is it's a cultural too. Brazilians and Jamaican people and Puerto Rican people are just really obnoxious and loud, and I love it, and that's because who I am.
Yeah. So really, the point about this is just that point, is to understand that your activity, right? We talked about listening with our body. Your understanding is also reflected in your body language. So it's the if somebody makes that great insight, you're like, great, got it, go on, right? But that also means also leaving time for pauses, right? Pauses is super important. Sometimes when we ask deep questions that really need time to reflect, or things that may have a deep emotional resonance, you really need to give space for that to come out. And sometimes it can be uncomfortable. Sometimes these can be pauses of 30 seconds. Sometimes they can be a couple minutes, right? And the thing is, in conversation, we naturally want to fill spaces, right? Especially in this day and age where we're constantly inundated with content. So if there's space in a conversation or space after a question, the natural response is like, you want to fill it with noise. You want to fill that space. But this is a very powerful tool. It's incredibly powerful in negotiation. When you ask somebody for something what they want, and you just sit back and you let them speak, and they'll want, the inclination is they'll want to respond with something. It's the same thing in facilitating conversation, right? Give space and allow for this person to really think about the meaning of the response. And you can get some really powerful tools from that. Joe.
And I wanted to add something on that. I think that one's, to me, like in my coaching journey, that's probably the hardest thing ever. It's so hard. But you ask a question and you drop it and you just let the power of the person go inward, and you just let it be. Because a lot of times, maybe not just we fill it with a like a comment, but we also want to layer question after question. So it's not just it's just not even asking more questions. Say a question and that's it. Not another one, not 2-3 questions. So that's something I wanted to add to that. Just also not say another question, like another question to the question.
Yeah.
This is your captain speaking. We need to jump into our breakout rooms.
Beautiful. So let's do this quickly, right? So let's move on to sharing our stories and really having really awesome dialogue with each other, like these two guys right here. So today's exercise, we're going to share our story one-on-one for 10 minutes. And the goal is for each individual to practice active listening and identifying themes. Again, I recommend doing this with a pen and paper so that you can really focus on listening and like giving as much eye contact directly into the camera as much as you can. Joe, would you and Cassie like to present see if we could do short for about 5 minutes and just kind of show about hearing a story and then pulling out themes. So if you and Cassie would love to come to the stage.
Hey, Cassie.
Hi.
How are you? Nice to see you again.
Yes, we talked yesterday.
Yes. So let's pick it up just to model it at, I would say, where would you like to pick it up? Where do you feel from our conversation yesterday that you think we could model it?
A chase for adventure. I don't know.
Okay. So what is adventure? What was adventure for you?
Well, I grew up in Nebraska on a farm. It was a very sedate, comfortable, safe life, but there, in the middle of Nebraska, there's nothing close, like within 8 hours. So I was always like reading and watching TV and getting caught up in what is out there in the world. And my mom.
The word, and I'm gonna jump here. The word that I'm getting coming is like there's a longing. There was like there was something calling you there. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, my mom, she would pack us up in a van when we were kids while my dad was working, and she would take us to like Colorado and some of the surrounding states to travel. And so I think I got that like sense of wanting to see the world from her because she never got to see it. And I went to Washington, D.C. to visit one time and then ended up moving there.
Okay, and right there was I sensed the giggle. What was that giggle about?
Oh, I went back and forth a couple of times in Washington, D.C. Like in high school, I went for a couple day trip to just get engaged civically. And then I went to college. I never studied abroad, which I totally regretted. And my boyfriend at the time knew that I wanted to travel more and I liked politics. So he recommended I apply for an internship in DC. So I lived there, for 3 months. It's like an internship, and then went back to Nebraska, graduated, and eventually spent like a year working and just like longing to get back to DC because it was like the city of activity and the elections were coming up and all that.
Yeah, so getting from there's something bringing you to calling you from DC. What was there that was calling you?
Oh, I think it was the unknown and like all the opportunities, because Nebraska is like very safe, but from my perspective, there weren't very many opportunities, especially politically. So like that was really exciting to me, especially when I was young and had more energy.
Yeah. And that excitement, what was the importance for you in your life as you learned about that excitement?
I think for me, it was kind of finding out who I was, because I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. I was kind of told like, this is who you are and this is what you do. And I was also a middle child and an overachiever, because I'm like, I have to pay for college. And so after I graduated from college and got a job and like moved to DC, it was kind of, I had the sense of like, what's next? And figuring myself out, I think, was what was next.
And I'm getting this sense, and I'll reflect it back and see how it lands, that your life was very structured, very predictable, very in a box, and there was almost like this longing to escape it. How does that resonate?
Yeah, definitely. I think for so long I was focused on like, what's the next step to get me to like security and safety, that like once I had those things, I was like, okay, now I feel constrained by them, and now I want to see the world and travel and meet new people and just like expand my mind. So DC was that.
Yeah, and I sense, and Keone, give us the cue whenever. I sensed that when you contemplated that, and and what I was reflecting, something shifted in you. There was a giggle there. That liberation. What was in that liberation for you?
Kind of, for me, I felt like I was in the struggle of past Cassie, like Nebraska farm girl Cassie, and who could Cassie become? And for me, like, it was, to put it simply, it was like liberalizing myself, like expanding my viewpoints, like owning my decisions and who I am and how I view myself, because I think I allowed myself to think pretty often like, this is what I need to do, so I'm just going to do it and just keep going, but not really understand why I was doing it.
Yeah. So I'm getting into start pulling some themes here. I'm getting, and also from our conversation, there is a longing for freedom, a longing for exploration, a longing for creativity. So the thread here is excitement.
Fly like an eagle.
Yeah. There is this.
I wanna fly like an eagle. Songs are all about our personal quest for freedom or love or like whatever. And I hear my story in Cassie, and it's making me want to cry. I was the son of a pastor. I grew up I became a designer. I left my business at 39 to go find out. I wanted to feel free. I had no agency. I had an agency, but I had no personal agency. I didn't know who I was, and I lived on that journey. Yeah. And here we are, because this is actually part of my journey. It's like the last 7 years. So I'm crying because you are me and I am you. I am Cassie. And that's it's beautiful. Now, not everybody's going to have the same story as me and Cassie, but we all share the same stories and we resonate with each other because of it.
Absolutely.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Cassie. Ready for portal jump, people? How do you guys feel complete? Cassie, how did that feel to share in public?
It felt good. I think for a long time, I just thought that was a pretty normal, boring experience or life, and there wasn't really anything unique about it. And so I think having these conversations and talking to Joe yesterday about like my story and a little bit further, like has helped me realize like those are positive attributes and I need to like embrace them and own up to them, essentially.
Exactly. That's so beautiful. Yeah. All the things that you judged are you.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're powerful.
And you can play that song from Bette Midler, Did you ever know that you're my hero? To yourself, and then cry. Like, oh my God, I wrote my own hero. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, guys. So,
ready.
so yeah, we're gonna portal jump.
3, 2. All right, I am going to shut down my music. That was The Break, brought to you by Madame Gandhi and The Future is Female. Amazing song. Righty. Could you, is it off now?
It is.
Wow, that was a rough jump. But that's a really good animation. The two puppets. All right, welcome back. Could you hear the music that I was playing or no?
I did while when I
all right, got it. Wow, Raphael's in the studio, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, you know, I just want to recap, you know, what the goals were for that exercise and what we're going to be doing next week, and how this all ties together. So based on the conversation that we were having, what we're going to do is next week, we're going to start identifying the themes. So the themes are going to really be about, you know, the ways that you've expressed yourself through your journey, and the goals towards that, you know, and the impact that you want to have. This is an example of mine, but for example, in my story, you know, my themes have coming from Jamaica, which is this multicultural, multi-ethnic Caribbean island, and how I've always lived, you know, their motto, out of many, one people. So it's really about building cultures and building inclusiveness. You know, my desire to be creative and it being limited by my mother, who wanted me to be an engineer, and me like breaking out and getting back into that is about innovating brands and creating cultures. You know, my technological background, which is really about hacking systems, right? Like these are all of the themes that really came, that I was able to understand in my story. And then the impact, of course, which is, you know, the way that I see the world and the way that I believe the world should be. And so that's really about, you know, making sure that the future is culturally divergent and fun, understanding that art and culture are the future brands, and to influence the culture to be more diverse. So just some thoughts, real quick dive into what we're going to be doing next week. But let's dive into the upload. And then after that, I'd love to talk about everyone's experiences.
And one thing I want to real quick note is that if you can note Keone's story and start seeing it, how it's reflected in how the system is being led, right, and changing, and like how his unique voice and who he uniquely is actually being woven into what we're doing. That's co-creation, right? That's that 1 + 1 = many instead of 1 + 1 = 2, which is the traditional form of creation. Go for it, Keone. Back to you.
Yeah, no problem. So the upload that I'd like to leave everybody with today is from Isaac Asimov, who's one of my favorite writers of all time. I have like 3 of his books over here. And this was in the story that he wrote, Foundation's Edge. And it goes like this. All you have to do is to take a close look at yourself and you will understand everyone else, right? The journey to self-discovery is really the journey to understanding the universe. And this is why this exercise is so powerful, and why I think leadership in design, or leadership through design, really starts with self-development. The skills that you use to understand yourself more are the same skills that you use to understand the world, your customers, your friends, your community, all of those things. So I'm going to reference a couple books that I got a lot of this information with. Start with Why by Simon Sinek, The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell, and Superman on the Couch by Danny Fingeroth. So today's episode, as always, is brought to you by Core's Magic. So, you know, as always, we ask for you, if any of this resonates with you, check out coresmagic.com. It's an incredible place for you to connect with Core and really figure out, you know, the next stages of your creative journey. But what I'd like to do is open up the floor for conversation and really talk about today's experiences. I know we're limited on time and we're trying to keep this tighter and tighter in terms of format, but we really want to make sure that you guys get a chance to respond and open up. So I'd love to hear from everyone how this experience was for them.
Yes, Mauricio. Yeah, jump in, people.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for the imperfection and for the time being limited. It's like it's always going to be the case. Clients are always busy, and sometimes the session takes too long. And what I do is I just say, you know what, can we continue for today? Also, permission to leave at 12:30 if you guys need to go. There's no commitment to it. It's just, yeah, you guys can go.
Yeah. And so I'll read some of the comments that we have in the chat. Shaquille, I feel like we could each have a movie about our lives. Mauricio is like 100%. And that's totally normal. Adriana said that it was great, but she didn't have time to hear Clifford's story. You know, and we encourage you, you know, like what happens in today's session is just supposed to be an anchor for you guys to be able to continue this outside of our sessions. You know, I recommend, you know, taking an hour, you know, half an hour for each of you to really dive in and share. It's super important. But today's session is really about understanding the keys and the principles behind this activity and getting you guys started so that you guys can carry this on your own time.
We'll have circles in the accelerator for you guys to do this with each other.
Yeah. Arson and
Keone?
Yeah, what's up, Cliff?
Is it okay if I just share just real quick the experience with Adriana?
Please.
It was really cool to be able to hear Adriana's story because, you know, growing up in Mexico City is a long way from Saratoga Springs, New York, where I grew up, but I was able to relate to her story being raised Catholic, and on the other end, coming out of college or into the real world, maybe being a little bit less religious, and also having a parental guidance that was really instrumental in having them support your dream. Because sometimes coming from a fairly conservative family, if you come from that space, you may or may not have that support for your dreams. So learning about what her father meant to her in her life, it was just, her story was just very relatable, and how she ended up being in web design when she was first working in the real world, and then transitioning to photography and finding her way to the future, and then resonating with the system. I found a lot of similarities in my journey and path and story, and I felt like kind of how Keone was for me, that I can hopefully share some of my experience with Adriana at some point, you know, when we go even deeper, if we do, and kind of paying it forward in that regard.
Yeah, man, that was awesome to hear, Cliff, and thank you, man. And you know, the truth of the matter is, this is the power of community. You know, what I feel like I was doing for you, Cliff, is really being an awesome community member. And it was less about, you know, me being concerned with trying to like necessarily get you to a certain place, but it was about me creating this safe space within our relationship for you to understand my story and my experience, and how, you know, the lessons that I've gone through and my superpower can really affect you, and vice versa. And look, oh, the pets are coming out. Look at that. Is that Nina, Mary? Yeah.
Yeah, she's giving me a hug. She's so big she can put her paws on my shoulders.
So yeah, so while everyone is showing pets in the video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through some of the feedback that we got in the chat. Arsenage, who says this is a really amazing framework to instantly connect with each other. And yeah, it's absolutely a framework for connection. Here's the key, guys: the deeper that a client can understand you, the deeper that your creative, collaborators can understand you, the more powerful the production and the fidelity of the work that you guys do together is going to be. Now you guys are really in a place where you guys can start to co-create together from a place of authenticity. And as we know, authenticity is the best way for us to be our most powerful selves. Marlene Hutchinson says that you had some wonderful moments with Patricia and learning her story. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Marlene. Dexter, he says, I always say that one of the best tools for growth as a human to spend time and energy with people who have a completely different background from you and different values. Indeed. There's a famous quote in Dune that I love that says, to grow, travel.
Portal jumping.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what else. For Dexter, again, and building on that thought, he says, it helps build empathy and building a collection of experiences from people you meet are like infinity stones. Jose, psh, Joe, psh, Mary.
Yeah, the secret superpower is really being able to understand what makes your friends and your collaborators really great and highlight it in them, as people. Something that Christo did really well with me when I was training under his tutelage and helped me say, oh, wait a minute. There's something here that's unique, no matter what the part of the journey is. You sail with pirates for a while and you get all their secret powers, and then you then admire and give homage to your masters, which are your friends and your family, your parents. It's honor thy father and honor thy mother. And I always say, the other night I had a Keone and the gentleman, the men in my life, Barrett and the now infamous Tony Wong, and I told him that night, you guys are my father. I've learned all the skills that I have from you guys, and we've rolled together in many adventures. So that's what I get from Luffy also, because it's okay to be your superpower and leverage the other folks' power and then learn from their power. And that's the same thing you do with clients. If you can weave that magic inside your client work, you become, a captain.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Jose. Reading on a few more comments that are in the thread. I've got Shivani, who I connected with. And she says she wishes that she could listen to all of you. Everyone's story has a starting point for infinite possibilities.
Ooh, that's beautiful. Dexter wants to say something too.
Yeah. We'll bring him up after this. So she was saying, everyone's starting, and I love this, everyone's story has a starting point for infinite possibilities. I'm so thrilled to see how many opportunities and synergies exist on this call alone. Thank you for sharing your story, Keone. It means a lot that you took the time to share some of your deepest memories with me. Thank you for creating this space. And thank you for being here with us. Dexter, why don't you hop on up, brother? We'd love to hear you.
Yes, appreciate it. But I just wanted to say really quickly, I think it's dope, how we expound on each other's journey, because our journeys are so pivotal as to who we are as humans. And what I think is so dope about journeys is that sometimes those paths, cross each other and interconnect, as we become part of each other's journey. And what I think is so dope about branding, and the idea of, empathy in branding, it reminds me of the plot points and I don't know if y'all have ever seen a show called Misfits, but there's this portion where everyone was in doing community service, and there was this one night where they showed the same night but from everyone's different perspective and what this person was doing at that moment, and they have as characters they have no idea that they were all connected on that night, in some type of way. They just had their different perspective, and I feel like that's kind of how brand is. Every user or part of that brand, of that culture has a different perspective and a different motivation and a different reason but those motivations and those journeys, you know, kind of interconnect, and they have this common, you know, intersect, which is the brand, and how do we understand each other's perspectives and each other's journeys, and to find out what is that interconnection between all of us, and, you know, how do we highlight that commonality between our journeys, and then how do we expound on each other's journeys, you know, and help each other on those paths. So, and that's kind of like, you know, one of my things, like, to nerd out about branding is the idea of connection is just so dope to me. And, you know, taking a step away from yourself and putting yourself in someone else's shoes as they walk their journey, like my favorite aspect of it. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yo, man, thank you so much for that. That was super powerful, and I totally resonate with that. Gosh, I'm trying to think. If there was this movie that came out in the mid-aughts, and it was about an assassination attempt on the president or something, and I feel like Nicolas Cage was in it, or Harrison Ford, one of those like older white dudes in Hollywood. I can't remember, but the point was, the film was about what we thought was an assassination attempt, and they replay the story from 5 different angles. And at the end of the film, you get this completely different understanding of what the beginning of the film was about. And it's because you understand the point of view from all of the different primary characters in the film. Vantage point is so important, right? And it's not only for our ability, for example, in core and in branding, to be able to understand the story and be able to pull values and themes that really are the foundation of the culture. But what it allows for us to do is it allows for us to be able to build really powerful personas, right? And usually with startups, you know, you have very few customers, so you're building personas from scratch. But when you get into established brands, when you can actually fill those personas with real customers and understand the real emotional point of view, really be able to empathize from where you come from, then you can really create innovative solutions. Steve Jobs was a master of that, you know, and he talks about, you know, and I mentioned this in a previous recording, but he talks about the, how does he call it? His ability to continuously innovate. And he has a quote where he references Wayne Gretzky, of all people. And he talks about what Apple does as a whole. And he says that while some people chase the puck, Wayne Gretzky, the quote goes, Wayne Gretzky says, when they asked him how he was able to be so successful, and he says, while other people were chasing the puck, he went to where the puck was supposed to be, right? And so, you know, the whole premise behind that statement is, in listening, in understanding, he understands the true journey, the true destination, the true process. And so instead of trying to just listen at a shallow level and follow the puck, he's trying to understand it at a deeper level. Like, where are we trying to go? What is the intent? What is the full circumstance? And apply that kind of thinking to Apple. I thought that it was a really awesome tidbit, but I also thought that it was a really radical way of thinking about the way you understand people and things and opportunities. So yeah, floor is still open, y'all. Love to hear from you guys.
I just wanted to say that 10 minutes wasn't enough today. I felt like we were just getting started with Marlene. She was a really good facilitator and asked the questions. I think the modeling part that Joe and Cassie did really helped with us, and we'd love to hear more about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
And you know, I was going to share something, and now that you brought that up, Patricia, a lot of times, and this is something that we feel sometimes is not not polite, but as long as you, which we didn't have the time here because in the little sample that we did, but intruding, I don't know if you noticed, I intruded, kind of like, you know, it's rude to cut someone mid-sentence, but a lot of the times that's something I just wanted to share because I noticed it happened. And intruding is very powerful because you're trying to, there's something that's happening, and that's where the person is at that moment, and you want to intrude and go in there skillfully, so right, and try to go in there and see, hey, I just saw something, what's going on here, what's happening, what's showing up, and it's gonna then make that person, because a lot of times we're just in we put play and we're just going, but we don't realize what's happening beneath the surface as the one speaking, right? So then as us, the one listening, it is our job to notice these things and be curious, like Keone said, and notice, I see something here. If we're in third level listening, something showed up for you, boom, intrude, especially in the arc of where you're headed, right? Because there is, especially when you're dealing with brands, I mean, you're trying to unearth something. So you're curious about how this relates to that, and this just showed up. What's this about? So intruding is also, it's very powerful and needed to capture those things when they come, because they're fleeting moments. They open up and they close, and it is to capture them in that moment only could be done so by intruding. So one thing that I do is just in the beginning of the relationship, when you're creating the container, which by the way is very important, it's to co-create what's, and setting the expectations, we can say, letting them know that it's going to happen, and asking them for permission is, it's okay that I do that, and when I do that, this is why I'm doing it, and this is what I'm doing, and what's important about doing that. So that's something that just wanted to
I'm going to intrude, and I'm going to +1, but also say we should actually do a private session with our core community or with our leadership circle to have Joe walk them through how he sets the container, because it's actually very similar to how core does it, which is you request time, you request permission to control the time. When Joe, it cuts me off because I go off on an intellectual escapade of, and he can tell when I'm disconnected from what I'm saying emotionally, and he'll just come jump in. And at first I was like, wait, hold on, let me finish. But then I'm like, no, let him intrude, because he's hearing something that I'm not. Or he's like saying, rephrase, like, I don't feel like you're feeling that. I do that obnoxiously in how I facilitate clients, but I ask for permission. But it's great if we actually know why it's there. A lot of it is also the time. Like, we sometimes don't have a lot of time, and I need to get as much out of them as possible before we get, too much. But really just listening to the client talk out from their head, and you try to get him out of it. It's like, okay, you're not feeling this. Let me interrupt you. I apologize, but we need to move to this. But what you said, and you redirect.
Yeah, right there. One good thing to do that, and to do that right there, Jose, I would like to know your thoughts about that, is to articulate what you just heard. And right there, it's a perfect opportunity. So what I'm hearing, boom, 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 and then you can because let's move on to this topic. Like, it's a good way to let them know that they're being heard, that they're being listened to, and at the same time move.
It's like in the Dominican Republic, those guys in the traffic signals when there's no lights, and they're like,
yeah.
We have that too in the Philippines, by the way. Every stoplight counts. Thank you, Joe.
Yep. My pleasure.
Let's land this puppy.
I learned loads today. It's not easy to listen and be neutral. I've learned from Michael Caine. He mentioned in his acting method, you find out what when he becomes a different character, try and understand what are the common grounds and what are different. But what was interesting today was in ethnographic studies, there's a method called the 5 whys, and it was totally binned today. So I'm really glad for that, because it's like an interrogation. So I'm glad that method's been binned. Thank you, Keone.
Thank you, Yinder. And that there's a couple of really interesting things that I'll bring up as points of discussion. And then we'll land, and then we'll say adieu with much love. And it's in anthropology, there are 2 general perspectives in understanding culture: emic and edic. I don't know if you remember these. So emic is from the perception of somebody within the culture. You know, there's someone that was raised on the values that was enculturated within it. They grew up with everyone around them. So the values and the principles and the manifestation of all of the way that the culture sees the world and manages the world is reflective in their behavior and their personality. Margaret Mead did this in her seminal book, Coming of Age in Samoa. She imbued herself into the culture. She acted as if she was one of them. She fished alongside it and she slept with them. She performed all of the customs. That was her manner of understanding, right? And that is like the deepest level of really listening and hearing and understanding, an empathetic level. Then there's an Edic perspective, which for most of us, this is how we have to engage the world, where you're not actually a member of the culture. You're someone coming in from an external perspective. And what you have to understand is within that, we talked about our biases, that carries a heavy level or a heavy set of bias within you. And unless you're immersed in the culture, it's really hard to be able to reference those biases. So you are constantly trying to think from an emotional standpoint. You're trying to think from an empathetic place because you're trying to put yourself in the perspective under which this person who you're trying to understand was living and recounting, right? So I'll end with this note because it's a little bit morbid, but it's really fascinating. And this is about the Nazis' top interrogator. And this was an article that just recently came out on Reddit. It was today I learned, and I was on the Wikipedia earlier this morning, and I was like fascinated. And what was really fascinating about this is he was the most powerful interrogator, and he never caused bodily harm or abuse to anyone that he interrogated. He built a relationship with them. He would take them on nature walks. He would introduce them to his family. He would cook fancy dinners with them. He would explore, if there were pilots, they would go to the local Air Force and they would fly local planes. The way that he was able to interrogate and get the information was by having real human relationship. Even though this Nazi empire founded in all of these evil values, this individual was still able to get the information that they thought necessary. And he did so in the simplest way, through human skills, building the relationships, right? So I want to remind you guys that this is an exercise in leadership through design. This is an exercise in learning how to lead by learning how to lead yourself, and learning how to understand others by understanding yourself, right? So I just want to remind you that all of these skills are paramount to you being able to define success in your careers and being able to have higher fidelity in your creative projects, whether for yourself as artists or with others in the realm of design. So with that note, thank you guys all so much. I bid you adieu, and I want you guys to remember that you guys are loved, you guys are powerful, you guys can create anything your imagination can create. So.
Take care, everyone.
That was beautiful. Bye, everyone. And Mauricio, we'll jump on the personal, or do you want to share here?
No, it was something else.
We'll jump on the other thing.
Okay.
I'll set it to the WhatsApp.
Okay.
Awesome, guys. Take care. Marlene, so great to see you. What's up, Natasha?
Bye, Adriana. Bye, Natasha Scott. It's so good to see you.
Roxana.
Thank you.
Love to see you.
Jinder.
Dexter.
Kenny J, representing for your brotherhood.
Powerful insights, bro.
Not here today.
Yeah.
Look at
Bye.
Cassie and all the
Happy
cats. Oh my God.
Friday.
Thank you, Dexter. That was a beautiful share.
Yeah.
It's cats. Cassie's doing the Broadway show of Cats.
Trying to pet
We
them.
need to start dancing at some point during this.
Dance break.
Backrundo. I put Henry back to sleep because he's such an old man.
He's so done with me, by the way. He's so sleepy.
Facundo's like, please let me go to sleep. Yeah, you're like Elmira at this point. I love you. I'm gonna squeeze you. Bye, Cassie. Thank you for sharing.
Bye,
Love you.
Roxana. Bye, guys.